Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever time it may be. Thanks for joining me for episode 2 of Journey into the Present, The Catalyst. In episode 1, I spoke about the process I took to understand my non-present thinking. Consistently living in the past or the future was the source of much of my anxiety, the source of my willingness to accept far less than I deserve and to abandon key aspects of who I am in my attempts to placate others. But what was the catalyst event to change after accepting that reality for nearly 25 years? But before I get into that, I'm sure you're probably all wondering, is this just a story from a guy to therapeutically share one aspect of his life? The answer is no. This event was simply the catalyst that forced me to reevaluate all aspects of my life, including my career. The impact of anxiety reaches far from the personal life, as we spend far more time at work than we do at home. And so for me, the catalyst event was what I thought at the time was my biggest failure. I put a premium on maintaining my marriage. I can often be heard saying, if I fail at every single thing else in my life, but maintain my marriage, I will consider that a success. That's the goal. And so you can imagine the reality I had to face when it became clear that that was all ending. But what I find most interesting about this part of my life is that my body and my unconscious mind had known for years, perhaps for the entirety of the relationship, that this was going to be the result. But my inability to live in the present, my desire to be somewhere else, was all-consuming. Why? Well, in The Power of Now, written by Eckhart Tolle, I referenced this in my first episode. He says, if we're always living for the future, we never experience the present because the future is only a thought. The thoughts can be nice, can't they? They really can. But another good book that I read, Don't Believe Everything You Think, it talks about how thinking is the beginning and ending of your suffering. So, was that split sufficient enough to throw me into a complete rebuild and a reevaluation? The answer, candidly, is no. It was a split that required me to deal with infidelity, dishonesty, extreme disrespect, and that could have taken me anywhere. But I believe, truly, had it not been all of those things, that I would still be hooked and I would not have taken a hard look at myself. Instead, I was able to utilize all of that unpleasantness to make a clean break and start truly living, perhaps for the first time in my entire adult life. It took extreme actions for me to search for myself and be very, very surprised when I found myself right here in the present. You see, I wasn't lost. I was never lost. I was simply unconscious. And most of the time, it took a complete shattering of my then reality to realize that I had spent the majority of my life living unconsciously, thinking my way into and out of suffering. And it wasn't until my body started to revolt against me, more so than it had in the previous 20 years, that I realized things were going to have to change, and that change started with me. So do you need a catalyst event to make the active choice to live more consciously? Well, I don't know the answer to that. That just happened to be my path. But what I have found on the other side is living more presently or consciously is a joy and fulfillment that I didn't know I could ever experience or frankly even know existed. My life today, in many ways, is significantly more complex than it was before, but my anxiety is nearly zero on most days. I simply don't overreact like I used to, with the exception of driving. I'm not a road rager, but I still get pretty upset when you're driving 65 in the fast lane. You're gonna have to figure that out, people. But other than that, I'm doing a much better job of finding peace and living in the day-to-day and being in the present. So on our next episode, we're going to get into how I balance the need to make plans and think about the future while also maintaining presence. And also the results at work while all of this was happening. I'm going to share a lot of that with you all as well. Channeled effectively, catalytic events, self-improvement, and self-focus does not just improve your personal life or impact your personal life. It has a tremendous impact on your professional one as well. And so you may be asking, what are some of the tips that I use for staying present? Well, number one is just be aware. The first one is once you realize you're not thinking presently and you're not being present in the moment, in that moment you become present. Because now you're aware, you've called attention to it that I was thinking somewhere else, and now you're being brought right back to the present moment. Number two, take a break from the things that you know cause you to not be present. Maybe that's endless scrolling on social media, except for my videos, or email, or something else you need to take a break from. And number three, make sure you're getting active. I find my thoughts about the present are best when I stay active. Working out doesn't have to be intense, but it enables me to focus on the present and what I'm doing so I don't get myself hurt. It's also a good way for managing stress. So don't wait for a catalyst event if you don't have to. And if you've already had a catalyst event and you're wondering, why is this continuing on? Please understand, everybody has their own journey. But what I found is in my journey to the present is the more presently I live, the more stress that melts away. It doesn't mean there's not stress in my life, but I deal with that head on in the moment. And if I'm not dealing with that particular issue in that present time, then I've moved on to something else. And that has brought me a type of peace that I don't know that I can do a sufficient job of describing. So I hope you'll join me for episode 3, but until then, stay present, y'all.